On my first 2 days of my 2023 California's Great America trip, Flight Deck was closed, so I was very concerned that I was gonna miss out on one of my favorite inverts I've ever ridden. From my memories of this attraction in 2019, this thing was just incredible. So I was super excited to ride it again this year, and I got very lucky because on my last day it finally opened and it did not have a line. So I lapped Flight Deck 10 times on my last day at California's Great America. So now I feel like I have a great feel for this attraction, and I'm super excited to dig into this with you. Flight Deck is kind of tucked away in the bottom left corner of CGA. You have a great view of it from the parking lot, but when you're actually in the park, you can like barely see it because it's not the tallest ride in the world, and really the zero G roll is the only element that's like actually in the park. Everything else goes outside of it pretty much. When you're walking through the queue line, you're going to notice a bunch of outdated theming that's kind of ugly. It looks like it's been there since the Paramount days when this ride used to be themed to Top Gun, which is just kind of bizarre. It's pretty dirty, so it's really weird to be honest, but I guess it's passable, especially when you look at the other rides at CGA that have zero theming. So if you want to take some very old and poorly maintained theming over no theming, I guess that's there. But it's acceptable, I guess. But in my opinion, the fact that this ride does not have a station is completely unacceptable. Like, that's just ridiculous. And Flight Deck is not the only roller coaster at CGA that does not have a station, which is just absolutely absurd. It just looks wrong being there with an inverted coaster without a station. It is so weird. Especially when you look at other inverted coasters which have a station and then they have a covered maintenance shed, while Flight Deck over here has a exposed transfer track and no station. It's just ridiculous. And I feel so bad for the ride ops on Flight Deck. Like that's just gnarly, man. Every roller coaster should have some sort of covering or station, for at least for the ride operators. Like, come on, man. And the fact that this ride is so old and it never got a station is just absolutely ridiculous. But as I mentioned, I got 10 laps on this thing in one day, so I got a bunch of front row rides, back row rides. I even took a few laps in the middle. So I feel like I know this ride a lot better than I used to. So I'm far more confident in its rankings and how I feel about each of these elements. In general, though, the front row is obviously going to be the best for visuals, as it is for any B&M invert, because if you're in any other row other than the front, you're pretty restricted by the row in front of you because of the design of the trains. But the back row is obviously going to have more whip. And a great example of that is the first drop. In the back row right seat, this drop is awesome. You get some very fun pull down the drop. It's sweet in that seat, but pretty much everywhere else it's kind of forgettable, that's okay. You know, it's a B&M invert. The drop is rarely ever notable, so the fact that one seat is even good, that's awesome. Like, I got like a bunch of pull in the right seat and a little bit of float even, so I don't understand the physics of that. Like, even the seat right next to it was okay, but it just hit different in the back row far right seat. So if you get to ride Flight Deck, make sure you take at least one lap in that seat in particular, back row right side. Right after that first valley is actually really forceful, and that throws you right up into the vertical loop. Vertical loops on B&M inverts are pretty fun because it feels like you're kicking the sky, especially on shorter loops, and this one is pretty average size, so I wouldn't say that the kicking feeling is super defined, but you know, it's still present. You can literally do it yourself by swinging your legs out when you hit the top, which is kind of what I do because I think it's fun. But if you compare this vertical loop to the one on Silver Bullet, the apex of the loop on Silver Bullet is super well defined, so you don't even have to kick out your legs to feel that sensation. It's still there on Flight Deck, so it's fun. Not my favorite loop on a B&M invert though. Right after that, you hit the most forceful part of the ride. It's incredible how many G's you pull in this helix, this upward helix. I definitely grayed out a few times. In one ride in particular, it was like a super hard gray out. Like, it was pretty ridiculous. So if you're looking for intensity, this is definitely the standout moment on Flight Deck. Right after that is the 0G roll. This element is super whippy, and for me, I felt more of a difference sitting on the right side of the train, the right edge, compared to the left edge on this element when you compare that to the front versus the back. Like in the right seat, in the far right seat, it felt like a continuous whip through the entire inversion. But on the left edge, it was more, there was like a little pause after the inversion before it continued to whip, which is a little bizarre. Like it was like a split second where it like stopped whipping before it continued to. So I don't know if I'm just over analyzing this element or what, but that was like a distinct moment that I remember feeling on multiple rides. So I'm not sure what's up with that. So for that reason, I think this element is a little better in the right seat. But that's pretty nitpicky because either way, this element is super whippy and it's an awesome inversion. The hill over the lift hill is basically the only dead spot on the ride, but to be honest, it's kind of a well-needed breather because this ride is just so fast-paced that you kind of need a break, especially after 3 wild elements in a row. 4 if you're sitting in the back row right seat, because the drop is sick. That rolls you straight into the corkscrew right over the water, which is also another insanely whippy element. There is this odd transition out of it that kind of pops you upright for a second before you get thrown back to the left for the helix over the water. So that was a little bizarre, but you know, it's alright. And unlike the 0G roll, I felt that in every seat, so it's pretty interesting. It kind of added to the craziness of the element anyway, so it works. And of course that helix over the water is very intense. If you're in the left seat, you can look down at the water, which is super cool. You can even stick your hand out, which is a very cool visual, especially on the front. But for my visit this year, the water was like yellow, or it had something on it. I don't know why, but it looked kind of gross. So that was kind of bizarre. Don't remember that being the case when I rode this attraction for the first time in 2019. So I'm not sure what they're doing to that water over there. It's a little bizarre. But that sequence of events from after you cross over the lift hill to when you hit the brake run is just absolutely wild. Like I could feel the blood in my feet during that helix over the water, and you combine that with the whip of the corkscrew is just crazy. It's classic old school B&M. Because of both the helix over the water and the upward helix after the vertical loop, they're just so intense and you can actually feel the blood rush to your feet. My feet kind of hurt after 10 rides in one day, so just be aware, like kind of pace yourself, because in the morning I basically rode it like 5 times in a row, and then I came back to it at different points during the day, and it was a walk-on all day, which just didn't make any sense to me because this ride is awesome. It's an incredible ride experience. I would say it's better than Gold Striker, but if you watch my review on Gold Striker, you know that I love Gold Striker in the front row. And the way I rank coasters is I rank them based on the best experience the ride offers. So I would say front row on Gold Striker is better than any row on Flight Deck. So for that reason, I have to rank Gold Striker ahead of Flight Deck, even though I would make the argument that Flight Deck is definitely more consistent of a ride experience. So it's very close for me, but I just have to give Gold Striker the edge. And if you want to hear more about my opinions on Gold Striker, go ahead and check out that video. But yeah, Flight Deck is a very complete ride experience, even though it is pretty short. And I might just have that opinion because I got to ride it so much in one day. Had I only gotten 1 or 2 rides, I probably would have been craving more from it, but you know, I just went back. There were even a couple times where I got to stay in the same seat or in the same row and just ride again. So I might be overlooking the duration issue that many people have with this ride, but it wasn't a problem for me. I still think this is an awesome B&M invert. Definitely the best one in California. It is so much better than Batman and Silver Bullet, in my opinion. But I would take Banshee and Raptor over it, but that's kind of an unfair comparison because they're just on such a larger scale. And for the other B&M inverts that I've ridden, I only got 1 ride on on Alpengeist, on Montu, and on Afterburn. So I really don't feel like I have a great feel for those rides. So it's pretty difficult for me to rank them. Like, I feel like I have a great feeling for Banshee. And of course, Silver Bullet is at my home park. I've gotten a bunch of laps on Batman this year. And of course, getting 10 laps on Flight Deck. I definitely know what this ride experience is now, which is great because I love this ride. This thing is incredible. So right now it's my third favorite B&M invert, but I would definitely need some re-rides on the three that I mentioned, especially Montu. One thing I forgot to mention about the Flight Deck ride experience was that in the far left seat, after the final helix over the water, when you curve up into the brake run, you get a insane near miss with the fence that's on the brake run. It's like crazy how close you get to it, and because it's a right turn going into the brake run, the fence just appears and it's like right there. It's kind of alarming. So that's my favorite near miss on Flight Deck, which is kind of funny because it's like the end of the ride, but it only works if you're in the far left seat and in the back row, or in a row that isn't the front row, so you can't see it coming. But overall, I love the visuals of the front row, but to be honest, I thought the forces were a little better in the back. This is an awesome ride no matter where you sit, and it's definitely one of my favorite inverts. Overall, I thought the smoothness of the ride was pretty standard for a B&M. There were slight jitters at points, but it wasn't too bad at all. I love this ride so much. I bought a shirt for it. I would have bought a Nano coaster, but they were gone, which is kind of lame, but whatever. The funny thing is that California's Great America had Nano coasters for basically every ride. Like Grizzly and Patriot had Nano coasters, which is just so funny to me because you could see they basically had their whole stock. But like Railblazer only had a few left, and of course Gold Striker only had a few left. And as I said, Flight Decks were gone. But Grizzly and Patriot, like the whole thing was there, which was just hilarious to me. I'm surprised they even offer those. One more note about this ride before we wrap things up is the fact that on the brake run, they play this song. They play the song Come Together on the brake run, like every time you hit the brake run. I think it's just constantly playing on loop on the brake runs, so it got kind of annoying after 10 rides, but you know, it's kind of a funny touch. It works. But once again, I just feel bad for the ride ops. They have to hear that, and you don't have a station. It's just ridiculous. And Canopy Coaster pointed out the fact that Gold Striker has 3 covered brake runs, and Flight Deck, Patriot, and Demon don't even have a station, which is just bonkers. That's so silly. But yeah, this is absolutely an awesome B&M invert, and you should totally come out and ride it. I really hope that this ride gets saved. I hope it doesn't close with the park, but it seems very unrealistic. To me, it seems like Railblazer is really the only ride that might escape Great America. I mean, maybe some of the flat rides. But if we look at roller coasters, I feel like Railblazer is probably the only one that's going to get relocated. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. This ride is incredible, and I hope it sticks around. But, you know, we'll see. So make sure you come out and ride it while it's still open, because this is a ride experience you will not forget. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you later.